Welcome to another episode of Mission Compliance, Unleashing Growth Potential for Defense Contractors. In today's episode, we continue down the road of understanding CMMC, its regulations, and controls. Up next is AU L2-3.3.1. That's right, we're on control family number 3. Create and retain system audit logs and records to the extent needed to enable monitoring, analysis, investigation, and reporting of unlawful or unauthorized system activity. That is a mouthful. We'll break down what this control means, why it matters, and how it impacts your organization's cybersecurity posture. We'll also provide practical insights and strategies for achieving compliance and securing your systems effectively. So whether you're a defense contractor aiming to win more contracts or simply someone interested in bolstering your cybersecurity knowledge, you're in the right place. Here comes the boom! We're joined once again today by Mike Frieder, President of On-Call Compliance Solutions and a CMMC Professional Assessor. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Always a pleasure, Roman.
So, Mike, today, as I mentioned, we move on to control family number 3. This control family is all about auditing and accountability. This first control point is about creating audit logs that would be able to spot unauthorized system activity. So with that being said, why is it important to create and maintain audit logs?
Yeah, phenomenal question, Roman. I think when we get into Control Family 3, we begin to really get into, I think, a different kind of control family than the first two. The first two, were ultimately all about setting the stage. Setting the stage to understand that we have to control access, setting the stage that we have to make our people aware of what's going on. And now Control Family 3 begins to really get into how do we do it? How do we secure these systems? Not just what you've got to do, but now how do we do it? So Control Family 3.3 Audit and Accountability really begins to get into the mechanics of how security should be administrated and is mandated under NIST SP 800-171. 3.3.1, create retain system audit logs and records to the extent needed to enable the monitoring, analysis, investigation, and reporting of unlawful, unauthorized system activity is, again, I call it a foretelling control. What they're really telling you in this control is, this is what you have to do to accomplish this result. So what you have to do is you have to create and retain system audit logs. That means that you must, one, make sure your systems are properly putting out logs. Two, retain those logs in some sort of a repository. And then three, make sure that you've got, all of those things adequate enough. So what are you going to do with it? That you have them to the extent needed to enable the monitoring, analysis, investigation, and reporting of unlawful or unauthorized system activity. So, if we dive into the mechanics of this, it's telling us you've got to have a mechanism that can create the logs. Okay, generally that's the equipment or software systems themselves. Then you've got to be able to store them somewhere. This is foretelling of the idea that you're going to have a system to deal with the logs. Then it's telling you what you got to do with that system, which is you're going to need it to be able to do all of these things, right? The monitoring, analysis, investigation, reporting. And then the why is because you need to be able to report on unlawful or unauthorized system activity. And all of those things combined tell you that you need a system. You need some kind of a system. The question is, do you have it? And most companies that are approaching information security seriously for the first time, they don't even have it. Okay. I'll tell you that for us as a managed IT services firm many, many, many years ago, when we were first getting into NIST SP 800-171, we looked at this and we were scratching our heads. We couldn't figure out what it meant. We couldn't figure out what we had to do. And we were introduced to something at that time that was kind of new on the market called a Security Information and Event Management System, or a SIEM system. If you're just running IT for the purpose of keeping your organization up and going, you don't use a SIEM system. You just don't. You don't need it. There's no point. But when you've got a larger team and when you have a need to execute real critical security, all of a sudden having a solution like, let's say, CrowdStrike or Sophos, which is what we prefer, having an endpoint management system in place that'll do antivirus and scanning and stuff like that is not good enough. The reason for that is because when these attacks get executed, they didn't do anything malicious before they executed the attack. All right, uh, it's a rogue agent. It's someone who got into the system using legitimate credentials, or they found a way to hack and get credentialed into the system where they're not going to set off the alarms of an endpoint management system. And that's the real point. This might be the biggest maturing point that a company who goes through NIST SP 800-171 will ever have. The realization that a reactive endpoint management solution, which they are all reactive, they're all reacting to what's going on with the system at the time, is not good enough for security. And this is a pivotal concept, maybe the most important concept in all of NIST SP 800-171, particularly for small to mid-sized companies. You have to have a SIEM system. And what you're going to see throughout this control family and see throughout this control is that you're going to hear that the solution to a lot of this is we have a SIEM system. You're going to see that answer over and over again. And it's something that I think is just so incredibly critical for any IT person to really understand. If you've never heard of these systems before, go out and Google them, chat GPT them, whatever you want to call it. The point is that if you don't really understand what a SIEM system does, we'll try to explain it here, but ultimately, you're going to need to know what it is if you're going to comply with NIST SP 800-171. I actually had a lengthy conversation with a guy named Gary Jassain, who wrote 70% of the original NIST SP 800-171, revision 1 and 2. I had a lengthy conversation with him to try to figure out, is it possible to comply with NIST without a SIEM system? And the short answer is no. NIST was almost written for the purpose of introducing this concept to private defense contractors who really just don't know it exists. They think they just throw a firewall in place and call it a day and they're good to go. So much more to security. And it's just absolutely necessary. A SIEM solution takes you from being reactive to proactive. And that, I think, is what you're going to find the Control Family 3 is all about. It's definitely what, the first control is really indicating towards. And let's go through it. So go ahead, Roman. I know you're going to ask the question. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. But yeah, that's a little bit about that control.
Yep. What are the key assessment points on this one?
Yeah, sorry, man. I'm sitting here looking at my sheet on this, and
I
I'm
have
like,
one job. I have
that's
one job. You're stepping on.
right, that's right. So first off, determine if audit logs needed, i.e., event types to be logged to enable the monitoring, analysis, investigation, and reporting of unlawful or unauthorized system activity are specified. So in other words, do you have a system that specifies what it is in the audit logs that you're looking for? Obviously, computers constantly put out logs for every successful action the system takes. So we can't look at everything. That would be too exhaustive and too time consuming. So does your SIEM system know what are security relevant or security related events to look for and then pull that into the repository? So the short answer is this is all implemented within your SIEM solution. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to tell you is I'm going to tell you that every answer of all these assessment points is the same. It's, do you have a SIEM solution? And if so, you can say it's implemented via the SIEM solution. Again, assessment point number 2, determine if content of audit records needed to support monitoring, analysis, investigation, and reporting of unlawful or unauthorized system activity is defined. And the answer is yes, that gets defined in what logs you're pulling and reporting on in your SIEM system. Okay, determine if the content of audit records needed to support monitoring. So determine if the content coming out of the log files is adequate, basically, for security monitoring. Again, if you have a user whose permissions are escalated, your SIEM solution should be alerting your help desk that that happened. That all happens through logs because there's nothing malicious. There's nothing an antivirus would respond to about a user permission escalation. And that's what this system does. Next up, determine if audit records are created. Yes, right. Your SIEM system is going to report back to you, hopefully, if there's a problem with that. Determine if audit records, once created, contain the defined content. Determine if retention requirements for audit records are defined. And again, so what we do is we recommend to clients that you have a SIEM solution that can retain for at least 90 days. Everybody knows you have 3 days to report a cyber incident or 72 hours. And then you have a 90-day period to go through where you're compliant, or excuse me, the DoD can go and request records from you. So I would recommend being able to go back and go through 90 days worth of records, when you're setting up your SIEM. Ideally, it's a year. We set ours up for a year. Next, determine if audit records are retained as defined. Is implemented from via SIEM solution, 90-day record retention. Again, we want to make sure that they are retained for some period of time to be able to reference back to. So all very important stuff. And again, the idea here is pretty simple and straightforward that if you've got a system that's taking care of the logs, that it works, that it's adequately capturing the right information, and that it's retained for some period of time that's organizationally defined, We happen to like defining it at 90 days. Really, we like doing it at a year, but 90 days is a pretty happy medium because, again, storage space equals money. So those are the assessment points. A lot of assessment points. The good news is it's a really easy answer. It's an easy control to answer, like most of Family 3, if you have the right system in place, which is a SIEM system.
Pretty easy control to answer. You kind of alluded to this already, but if it's so easy, are there any potential difficulties enacting this one in an
Yeah, I
organization?
think I think there's two potential difficulties, and they are hard to overcome. First one is you have to have an IT person on staff that or an outsourced provider who's both compliant and understands this stuff. So I think one of the harder things to understand is what's the value in a SIEM. There's a lot of different products in this space. And then what do you need to monitor for? A lot of people don't really know what to monitor for. A lot of these SIEM solutions reminds me of Azure Government. They kind of come as a blank slate, and you have to program what it is that you're going to monitor, and that's difficult. So I think one is just, do you have an IT guy that understands this stuff? And if not, are you in they've got to go learn and up their knowledge. Second thing is it costs money, right? So this is a tricky expense because if you weren't in defense, you wouldn't need this. Now, I'm not saying you don't need it. I mean, from a security perspective, you ought to have it. But the average company that's small to mid-size doesn't have a SIEM system. They would almost only need a SIEM system if they have a very security conscious IT guy who understands it, or if they've obviously got these legal requirements on them. So I think from that perspective, both cost and knowledge on staff, it's not your average break fix IT guy that's going to really understand how to be a security guy. Then, one final thought about that is it's a different kind of person generally that really understands SIEM and real cybersecurity. They're not the same guy that's going to go fix end user problems on the desktop. So you also get into this tricky problem where, if you've only got a one-man IT shop, they need to outsource this. I mean, it's really like you're better off to go with a firm like OnCall who has specialty in cybersecurity and security management. That's really, a place that we not only shine, but I'll tell you, it's safer for the organization to outsource that. Security is a big responsibility. We have literally a large multi-person team that does nothing but handle those tickets when they come in and look through those logs and look through the alerts and figure out what's what. So I think in that respect, it's going to begin to be a mind shift for the company that they need more IT security than they did before if they want to come play in this government space, particularly in defense.
Exactly, and I think that's valuable information. I think keeping records of anything in your company is vitally important. But you know the drill here. We do the nitty-gritty, and then we finish it off with a fun question that Mike tends to sometimes sidestep and take it into a practical answer, which we appreciate. So with today's question, it is this: could you make keeping physical audit logs interesting by decorating it with colorful stickers?
You could. You can go get those stickers at cuisupply.com.
There you go.
I just got off of a virtual compliance officer call with a client, and I can't really give away too much information, but we were discussing this. And they said, well, our policy is going to be that we just don't print CUI. And I said, well, that's okay. You're still going to need the sticker kit because you have existing files. Like you're going to have to mark these. So yeah, at the end of the day, stickers are important, especially when it comes to compliance and CUI marking. So we haven't reached those controls yet in our podcast range, but you know what? I do have to say, at the end of the day, stickers are very, very important and crucial to being compliant.
Maybe not the kind of CUI marketing that I was thinking of, and I would caution against using those scratch and sniff stickers because that would be distracting to have your audit log smelling like strawberry and raspberry. But we digress.
Right. Or scratch off stickers, which could potentially reveal CUI underneath the coating.
That's true too. And and that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights, practical strategies, and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving world of defense. We'd like to extend our appreciation to Mike for bringing us all this information on audit logs. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman.
But the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to keep exploring these topics and connect with us on our social media channels. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with fellow listeners using the hashtag Mission Compliance Podcast. If you haven't already, what should they do, Mike?
Well, they should like, they should subscribe, tell a friend, and you know what? Tune into the next episode because we're going to keep having fun with compliance here and telling some really awesome jokes.
Yep. I don't know about awesome, but by subscribing to your favorite podcast platform, it lets you know when new episodes like this one are released. We'd also appreciate it if you could rate and review the show because your feedback helps us to continue to bring you thought-provoking episodes and high-quality content. Join us next time as we delve further into the dynamic world of defense, security, and industry innovation. Until then, take care, stay informed, and make compliance your mission. See you next time.
See you, everybody.